Welcome to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, helping you create your compelling company culture. My name is Dr. Dave Miles, leadership expert, organizational development consultant, and I am honored to be here today with John J Fenton, the CEO Sensei. And with that, John, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background before we get started.
Great, Dave. Thank you so much. And it's really a pleasure to be with you today. A little bit about me. So I work with CEOs and managing partners who love running their businesses, growing their businesses, and leading their teams, but hate all the stress that these bring. I am a little bit about my background. I'm an executive mentor, leadership mentor, and I was in the field of public accounting. I was a managing partner with one of the big BDO USA, one of the top 5 or 6 firms in the world. And really helped my team and help our practice transform the business. And we grew dramatically in the early 2000s. And I spent over 30 years with the firm, was a leader in 2 different offices of the firm. And we really just changed everything fundamentally that we were doing for the better. And what I see today is a lot of change going on in our world, right, in our environment. And so there's a lot of parallels to what we were going through 20 years ago. Totally different now, different kind of change happening, but there's a lot of opportunity for transformation, I think, in businesses. And so I've had a great career, great success with that. I was a collegiate athlete. I played college football for the University of Miami, which was really cool. But I learned a lot about teams and about successful teams, and really I was on championship teams and teams that weren't very good, both in the work environment as well as athletics. And I've always been a student of leadership and what makes a good team and what makes good teamwork, and how can I be the best leader I can be. And that's really what I'm focused on with my clients and their teams that I work with, is how can we be the best leaders we can be and transform our business in a positive way.
Nice. Yeah, we had spoken before, and I knew that you had played collegiate football, and it was actually, when we got a little bit more in depth into that, that was quite impressive to hear about some of that. But yeah, you spent a lot of time with BDO as a managing partner. How long were you there?
I was at the firm for 31 years.
Wow.
I took early retirement a few years ago to really follow my passion. And what I found was I wanted to help my clients and CEOs and business leaders in a different way that I could in a CPA, traditional CPA consulting firm. And so I embarked on a path to create that for myself and to create a new phase of my life. And so I've been working with CEOs, C-suite executives, managing partners to be the best they can be and to navigate all the change. The speed of change is happening so much more rapidly now, even than just a few years ago. And I'm always keeping my ear to the ground, new trends and new things that are happening and new ways of thinking. I like to say, think differently and achieve more.
Nice. Well, that was one of the reasons that I'd asked you to be on, is you looking at it from 2 different perspectives. You're looking at it from, hey, I was a managing partner of this top 5 firm, one of the big 5 firms for so many years. So you're looking at it from that managing partner, CEO perspective. But on the flip side of the coin, now in your new life, as you mentioned, you're helping them on the flip end. So for that, since you're looking at it from the both perspectives, to me, that was one of the big things when I really wanted to have you in for this initial episode as we get this kicked off on the Conversations on Leadership, because you did have that, I thought, a rather unique perspective that a lot of folks wouldn't if they're coming at it from just one or just the other.
Yeah, it's not theoretical. What I do, what I teach, and how I guide my clients and their teams is really based on, school of hard knocks and experience, right? Being in the trenches, right? And digging in and dealing with issues and day to day and stress and all the things that happen with that, and growth and so I had someone. I was just in a call yesterday with someone who said, what's really attractive to me about you is the fact that you were a managing partner, that you were in the business and you did understand what was going on. And so I bring that to the table. Some mentors, some executive mentors don't have that experience. Some are maybe a little more theoretical, maybe more pedigreed, maybe PhDs or whatever. I do have an MBA, but I look at a very practical perspective, and I'm really at the crossroads of the integration of a lot of different, areas of information, plus my own personal experience. And I throw in there a little bit of my own personal background, as well as a black belt in Tai Chi and a master of meditation. So I incorporate that as a sort of foundational way of how I handle and work with my clients and their teams, but also teaching them ways that they can really have great clarity amidst all the chaos.
Well, that's something that I'm hoping we can weave into with some of the questions here I want to get started with. But you're absolutely having that the Tai Chi and meditation into it just brings a completely different mindset, bringing the mindfulness into it. But to start off, let's get in with our first question for the segment: is what does leadership mean to you, and what does good leadership look like?
Those are great questions, Dave. Thank you, Dr. Dave. I like this quote from Stephen Covey. I was a big follower of Stephen Covey, and the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People is one of my foundational reading materials that I like to use, as well as several others. But he had a great quote about leadership, and I want to read this because it really just captures it for me, what I think is really valuable. Covey said, "Leadership is affirming people's worth and potential so clearly that they are inspired to see it in themselves." When I think about those words, I think about some of the best coaches I had, whether it was in athletics or best mentors that I have in the working world. The people that I aspired to be like were the people that really, saw potential in me, right? And saw potential in others, and helped inspire that and help them grow and see that for themselves. And that's really what my work is about, is helping them to see that for themselves. And I think really, honestly, good leaders need to be coaches themselves, need to coach their teams up, right? And some of the best leaders, and I'm a big Dolphins fan, Miami Dolphins fan. I grew up in South Florida. And one of the things I loved Don Shula, and I thought one of the great things Don Shula did was he adapted to the talent he had on his team. He could recognize the talent, adapted his strategies to the talent, and to put them in the best positions to be successful. And I think the same is true in business. We have very talented people, and we want to put them in the best position to be successful, so that the organization continues to grow, and that it's fulfilling for everybody, not just the CEO, not just the leader.
I like that when you talk about Don Shula and adapting his strategy to the talent, because I know there's a lot of talk, and I mean, do some of this on our own, is looking at matching potential candidates, especially in a leadership position, to what are the behaviors, what are the drivers, what are the competencies, what are the acumen that are needed to do the job, right, outside of the job description, and really matching the person to the job. But I like that for the team that you already have, especially if they're high performers, how can you tweak your strategy to accommodate them?
Yeah, or put them in the right position, right?
Exactly. And I'm sure that a lot of, when it comes back to job fit, especially if they're already there in your organization and they're a valuable member of the team, not everybody is like they say with the good to great, Jim Collins.
Yep.
You talk about putting the right people in the right seats on the bus. The cool part about adapting the strategy to the talent that I like is you probably already have a lot of the talented people there. It's just a matter of aligning them. And sometimes that's up, sometimes that's down, sometimes that's across. And unfortunately, I think a lot of folks from a surface level, I'm trying to rise the corporate ladder, down isn't a great direction to go. And but if you're in a better fit job, sometimes it's better to take that down position that can help you rise higher, longer, later than staying where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a real example of this. I had a client a couple of years ago, CEO, growing his business, and he had 8 or 9 branches around the country, and one of the branches was underperforming. And I asked him, I said, "Well, what's it costing you by not?" The GM wasn't getting the job done.
Right.
What's it costing you not having a conversation with the general manager? He knew very clearly what it was costing him, hundreds of thousands of dollars, by not taking action. But he didn't want to have that conversation. It's hard to have these conversations. And so he took action. He had the conversation. And what they realized was that this person, this GM, has some great talents that were useful to the company, but not in the GM role. So that person took a step into a different area where they realized they weren't getting the job done as well. They know. Everybody, if you're honest with yourself, you know you're not getting it done. So he got that person in the right spot, the right place, the right seat in the bus, right? And then promoted somebody within to be the general manager, who was much better at it. And it was a win-win-win all the way around.
Nice. If you don't mind me asking, just in generalities, because I certainly don't want, but what type of role, just as an example to the listeners, what type of role would, like, for example, he was a better fit for this versus that? I mean, almost instead of like GM going into sales or going into relationship management, or
it's a logistics company. And so he had a specialty experience in how to manage a segment of their business.
Nice.
That he was very good at, that they wanted to grow. And so, but he was the general manager. He was getting spread, in all the aspects of that division, right, that branch, and couldn't really focus in the area that he really excelled at. And so it freed him up to excel. I'm a big believer in leveraging your strengths. I'm a big believer in identifying your unique abilities, right? So you as a CEO have unique ability, right? Your people, each of them have a unique ability. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what that is. You got to really have your ear to the ground. You got to know your people, at least your direct reports, very well to assess their talent and to see what are their unique abilities and how can you plug them into the right position, the right place within the organization to excel.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about the direct reports. I'm a huge fan of sitting down as doing one-on-ones with your direct reports and really looking at, especially if you have any kind of behavioral assessment data on both of you, and really just putting it out there. And it doesn't really matter what the behavioral assessment is. It's just a matter of really understanding where you're coming from, where they're coming from, what their strengths and weaknesses are, what yours are, and same thing, to get an understanding at a whole different level other than just that cursory kind of work environment. You really get to know them on a deeper level with some data that you typically wouldn't have. And I think doing that with all your one-on-ones, if you have 6, 7, 8, 10 direct reports, knowing that and having that data from those, those one-on-one sit downs, I think is very powerful, because you can customize kind of how you communicate with your staff. One, personally, when you're communicating with a one-on-one, and they know what to expect from you and what you need. But on the other flip into that coin is the fact that also I've seen people completely change the way they do their team communication based on sitting down and doing individual one-on-one type things, because they realize some folks aren't like them. And you can't just throw something out at a conference table and say, Joe, give me your answer on this, or Sue, give me your answer on that. And they just freeze up, shut down, and get fairly resentful, versus, hey, if you let them know ahead of time, they start putting stuff on the agenda and putting it out 2 or 3 days early. Ask them, hey, I want to get your feedback on this during the meeting. Could you think of some responses? So it gives them that time to process and gives that thoughtful answer. So being able to structure that customly, I think is a huge win for senior leaders.
And you're talking about awareness, right? It's really about being aware.
Yeah.
And it's really I'm a big believer in mindset, right? Mindset is so important as the leader. And so being aware, having that awareness, right? And so that help those assessments. I know you have some great tools around that. And so having those assessments available to have that awareness and understanding, because I know we're going to talk a little bit about this maybe later, but one of the big mistakes leaders make is they assume. I call it the assumption trap.
Yeah.
Right. They assume they know what's happening, or why someone's doing something, or why even a customer is doing something. They assume based on limited information. And so, it puts you in a position where you don't really know what's going on. And so having that awareness can really help in that communication, because it's all about relationships at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's what leadership's about, relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're back again with John Fenton, the CEO Sensei, and we had a great conversation in our first segment, and we're going to continue that. And my next question that I had for you, John, to start out our second segment, what is one of the biggest leadership challenges that you have had to face?
I faced many.
After 31 years at a top 5 accounting firm, I'm assuming as a managing partner, I'm assuming you faced quite a litany of challenges, to say the least.
Well, the biggest challenge I had to face, honestly, and I want to share my story about this, is around health. And it's going to really lead into some other conversations. One of the biggest mistakes we make sometimes as leaders. So, I was managing the business, growing like crazy, putting in tons of hours, and really carried the weight of the firm on my shoulders. Right. I cared about our people. I knew they were working really hard. And, there were times where I would come home from a long day or a long week and late at night. And there was one time where my wife met me in the driveway and she was pounding her fist on the car. Why aren't you ever home? Why aren't you ever home? And I've been, just so intentional about working and doing a good job and leading my team and having a very successful team. So there's a lot of stress, right? A lot of stress from that. And, the challenge I faced was that I went to the doctor. I had an appointment with a doctor and went in for a stress test. And, he said I had an irregular heartbeat and they want to do some more testing. And they did that and dealt with that at that point in time. But fast forward that to about 3 years ago, and I was in a meeting with a client. And we're in the meeting, I passed out. And he nudged me a little bit. He thought I was sleeping and we're playing, or kind of joking, and he could not wake me up, could not revive me. And I wasn't sleeping. I just had stopped breathing. And he ran to get help, and they brought in the director of the facility that we were meeting at. He rushed in, ripped open my shirt, got me on the floor, and started administering CPR. And over 25 minutes, he worked on me. And he continued to work on me for 25 minutes. They brought in a defibrillator into the room, and the defibrillator went off 5 times in that 25-minute period. EMTs had arrived during this process, and they got me stabilized, sinus rhythm, and they rushed me to the hospital, and about 45 miles away, and put me into hypothermic coma. And I woke up a few days later in a hospital. And I was in the ICU, actually. And I woke up and there was my wife and my daughter sitting at my bedside. And what I realized, and it was a lesson I thought I had learned a few years earlier, was that I had put my health as last on my to-do list. I had all these goals and objectives to meet, putting a lot of pressure on myself. And the way my body responded to stress was my heart, and it was an irregular heartbeat, and it just stopped. And doctor said I beat the odds. I had a less than 10% chance of survival, and I survived. And good news, full recovery.
Outstanding.
So, I think as leaders, we put our health kind of last. If good health is on our list, it's the last thing on our list, and maybe it's once or a year, maybe longer, that we go to the doctor for an annual checkup. And it's so important. Everybody's body reacts differently to stress. I even wrote about this in my book, A 5-Minute Mastery: The Surprising Secrets for Transforming Your Stress to Success and Mastering What's Important. And what is important? We talked about relationships a moment ago, relationships with family, obviously, right? Family and your friends and your coworkers. And sometimes we push our health off to the back burner, right? So that's one of the biggest mistakes, I think, that, and one of the biggest challenges that I had to face was, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Do I resist or do I accept? And how do I deal with this? And so I took pretty much a whole year, better part of a year, and said, my health is my number one priority, and I'm going to focus on this. And I used a combination of great medical care, great doctors and nurses, the hospital, just amazing care that I received there. Also listening to the doctor's advice, but focusing on my breathing and focusing on getting enough rest, and not trying to control everything, not try to control I try to control outcomes. Okay, that's an illusion. Okay,
Oh, come on, you're in charge. What do you mean you can't control everything? I mean,
and even with my martial arts experience and mindfulness and Tai Chi and everything, you think I would know better, but a lot of CEOs and managing partners out there are very type A and success driven and goal oriented, and that's me. And so sometimes coaches don't listen to their own advice, right? So I had to really focus on my health and make it number one priority, which I did, and slowly ease back into my business. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenge I had to face, was giving myself permission that I can't control everything, accepting what was happening, not fighting it, not resisting it. And then where do I go from here? And what can I do to improve my health? And I was successful at it. Check another box, another goal achieved.
Yes. Well, I want to dovetail on that, because when you talk about leaders, you talk about a lot of folks with, for lack of a better term, type A personality, very results oriented, very driven behavioral style. And you talk about acceptance and saying, okay, I can't always control every piece of what this isn't an audio mixing board, right? I can't control every output that is coming from here 100%. What advice would you give to leaders that are in that same situation and had that same basic behavioral style, and say, how do you recommend them? Because you've done that. It's okay to let go a little bit and take the reins off. What advice would you give them?
Great question. I think first of all, control what you can control. And that's the only thing you can control is yourself and your response to stress. Okay. And the easiest thing you can do, and I'm glad you bring it up, because the simplest thing you can do to control your reaction to outside stress, right, is through your breathing. It's through your breathing. It's actually a book that just came out last year. It was a #1 New York Times bestseller called Breath by James Nestor. And I also include in my book, 5-Minute Mastery, a breathing technique that I have used for many, many years. When we focus on our breathing, we can actually control our stress response. And I don't want to get too sciencey here, but the simple fact is, when you breathe in, many times we breathe through our mouth way too much. We need to breathe into our nose and exhale through our mouth. When you breathe into your body, if you breathe through your nose or your mouth, you're breathing in oxygen. You are stimulating your stress response. You are stimulating the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. When you exhale and exhale deeply, you're stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest. So the way you deal with stress, and Nestor goes into this more in his book, really, is through releasing, breathing out a lot more. And what it is actually a lot of buildup of carbon dioxide in your body. The more you exhale, the more you can breathe in oxygen, the more efficient your use of oxygen is, but it helps to calm you down. Nice. To calm down, because we have there's a stimulus outside of us, some sort of stress, right? I used to be an very angry person. I used anger when I was younger as a way to help propel me, as a positive thing to help propel me in my life with success. But it became overwhelming at one point in my career where I was just too angry, and I could snap, it was not a good thing as a leader. It was not a good thing to be in that state. So through breathing and through the Tai Chi and the breathing, I was able to control my stress response to stimulus. And so you get stimulus. So some event happens outside of you, some stimulus. Your brain in the subconscious reacts. You don't even realize this is happening. It's your middle brain. It's the limbic system of your brain. It's where you have the seat of your emotions come from your brain, and your motor skills and long-term memory are in the limbic middle brain part of your brain. And so while you're being stimulated by something, right? So there's some event that happens, and it stimulates an emotional response internally. You don't even realize you have that emotion. And that emotion that process is a result of past experiences that are similar to that situation. It may not be typically not the same situation, but it's a similar response. And so your body doesn't distinguish between real physical threats and, perceived threats. The brain reacts the same way. So the body is a stress response. And so you have these emotions kind of bubbling up, and sometimes I would just explode, right? Because those emotions, the anger or whatever is building up, or frustration is building up inside. So you want to kind of work your way through that. And the easiest way to work your way through that is to just stop, pause, take deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. I encourage people to take 5 minutes a day. You can do it in 3 to 10 breaths and change your perspective. Because what it does, it gives you a chance to reset yourself so you don't have an automatic response, right? The first thing we're gonna do is respond right away. Like we're angry or whatever it is, we've got to respond right away. So it's stepping back for a moment, breathing, focusing on your breath in through your nose, out through your mouth, very slowly, not forcing it, just very slowly and calmly, helps to reset yourself so you can react in a more positive way in that situation. And really, a daily habit of you're building up your energy and building up your internal strength through breathing. Just take 5 minutes a day, which is what my book is about.
Nice. Well, it's funny because we're just doing a workshop on emotional intelligence last week, and I thought it was a lot of parallels, because we talked about the amygdala and the amygdala hijacking and stuff like that, and exactly what you were saying. But what I thought was interesting is some of the parallels. What you were saying is to the concept of emotional intelligence, and if you can, and I like very specifically Dr. Marshall Goldsmith's book Triggers, because it's very similar to the Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, but specifically with triggers, his big thing is just what you said. We're so used to, you get a stimulus and you have a response, stimulus, response, stimulus, response. And his big thing was, you've got to be able to take, and be aware of it. Because if you're not aware of it, then it's all over with the shouting. You're just done at that point. But once you're aware of it, then when you aware of the stimulus coming in, that even at just a half second, quarter second, just enough time to, I'm aware of it. That's where the cognitive brain the frontal cortex could come in and say, no, I'm consciously making a decision to think about it, to step back, to take a breath, to whatever, to, like you said, to make it where it's not automatic. Because that's what we're programmed to do, is have automatic responses. That's, it helps us get through life. But in this case, it's not helping us.
One of the worst things, I would do this, right? I would get an email that I wasn't too happy about, and I would type a response right away. Sometimes I would leave that or wait till the next day. What's really funny is the next day I would read that same email and it would be totally different tone. It was just the state I was in, right? I was being attacked, right? So sometimes giving yourself that permission to, I don't have to respond to everything all the time, which is a big mistake I think leaders make too, is they got to respond to everything, right? Step back for a moment, give yourself some grace. Take a couple minutes, breathe it out. Even the Navy SEALs use a breathing technique called box breathing.
Yep.
They call it box breathing because it has 4 parts to it, right? And it's the same thing. If you go to a yoga class, you're going to learn about how to breathe properly, or a Tai Chi class. Just breathe in through your nose, hold it for a moment, exhale slowly through your mouth. That is so important. And why do Navy SEALs do that? Because they're not in the most high stress situations in the entire military. Nobody is. We're talking real life and death, right?
Yeah.
And they have this motto of slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Yep.
So they slow it down. That's what I did to recover my health. I slowed things down. So slow is smooth, smooth is fast. In the long run, it's going to be faster. It's going to be more efficient. It's going to have a better outcome.
Yep. You're building those good habits.
Right. And so that breathing, that simple breathing technique, to help yourself be clear, have clarity. There's all kinds of confusion going on out there right now. And we're bombarded with information, right? It's confusing to our brains. So you got to find a way to create that clarity every day to be the best leader you can be.
Good deal. And I want to follow up on that on our next segment. So we're going to take a break, and we will be right back with Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave in just one moment. We are back with Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, and our special guest today is John Fenton, the CEO Sensei, and we are starting our last segment here, and we had a great conversation, a couple of responses for our first two segments, and I'd like to wrap these up. I've got two questions that I really want to make sure and cover before we go. And the next one is, what do you see as one of the biggest mistakes leaders make today?
Yeah, Dave, we've talked about several things today so far, and I really have a kind of a laundry list of 5 mistakes leaders make, right?
All right.
I see quite a bit. We've touched on, making assumptions, right? It's the assumption trap, I call it, right? Assuming maybe someone's lazy or someone's not getting the job done or whatever the assumption might be. Could be I had a client tell me about a situation with a customer. And he was making all kinds of assumptions about why the customer had changed their attitude and what was happening and being difficult. And that's we just can't assume anything. We have to ask. We have to dig in, ask good questions. In the process of doing that is make sure we're listening, not just talking. Listening is so important. The other one I think that is really a big mistake is, I think as leaders, we think that being vulnerable is being weak, right? And it's really not the case. It really is a sign of strength, because when you're more vulnerable, you're open yourself, you create an environment where everybody else can be more open. And when everyone is more open, you have more conversation, you have better decision-making, right? The flow of information moves more smoothly. The organization is better for it. Sometimes it's not pretty. Sometimes it can, get a little heated or a little ugly, but it's allowing yourself to be vulnerable is actually a thing of beauty. Being vulnerable is actually a thing of beauty because it fosters greater strength in the organization, not weakness. I think too is sometimes leaders feel like they have to know everything. We call it the know-it-all syndrome, right? They got to know every answer to everything. No,
you mean they don't?
They don't.
We don't
know everything.
Come on.
We don't.
Why? Say it ain't so, John. Come on, man.
I don't know everything, right? But it's having that humility to know you don't know everything. Exactly. And find the people in your organization who do, right? But also the flip side of that is imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, right? And very successful people, almost everybody who's been successful ever. When you hear about famous people talking about this, right, today. The imposter syndrome. How can I possibly, be a leader? How could I possibly be the person in charge? Why do they want to listen to me? Acknowledge the fact that you're going to have those thoughts. They're going to come up. It's a little self-doubt. All of us have that. So it's a control mechanism in our brain, right, to kind of make sure we're on track. But just know that you're going to have those thoughts and those feelings, and just choose to not fall into that. Choose to be the best leader you can be. Choose to do your best always.
Yeah. It's one thing to help you keep on track. It's one thing to let that derail you totally.
Absolutely. The other thing I think is a lot of people mistake that the leaders make is they feel like to be a good leader, they have to be charismatic. Not true. What you need to be is authentic. Be you, right? We all have different styles. We all have different ways of leading. Some of the most iconic companies did not have charismatic leaders. Okay. They were down to earth. They were true. They were truth speakers. They were honest. They were visionary. They had an idea of the future, what the future looked like, and they could articulate it, but they weren't always rah and, the big top figure and, figurehead in the face all the time. The best leaders, there's a saying that great leaders, or the best leaders, are the ones where everybody says, hey, look at what we did. And the leader just steps back. The leader steps back, lets the others take the credit.
Very true.
And I think the last mistake, as we talked about in the previous segment, was just, you got to make your health your number one priority. It's got to be near the top of your list, because without your health, without good health, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. And certainly relationships are so important.
Nice. No, it was funny to listen to somebody, because you talk about the assumption trap. And what's hilarious is like I said, you were making decisions on bad data, or making decisions with little or no data, We're totally making assumptions. But it's funny, even just looking at some of the behavioral assessments that you and I will take a look at, is that, you have, okay, this is the way you see yourself. But then a lot of times, hey, here's how you could potentially come across to people if you're under moderate levels of stress fatigue, whatever, or under extreme amounts of stress fatigue, et cetera, et cetera. And it's amazing when you look at that for all these different behavioral styles and communication styles, how people don't realize how they're coming across. But all you're seeing is the aberrant behavior. And so you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, they're just being a jerk, or what, there's, like you said, there's you're subscribing a motive to the behavior, and you're playing whack-a-mole with the behavior. And the problem ends up being that if you just realize, wait a minute, this aberrant behavior is being caused by some either moderate or extreme level of pressure, fatigue, stress, whatever the case may be, it's a little bit easier, like you said, instead of making that assumption and trying to just deal with the behavior, to bring them in, okay, John, okay, Sue, okay, Bill, what's going on? Is everything cool? Try to deal with, probe a little bit and find out, that you actually care about their well-being, but what's going on for the stress levels? Is something at work, something at home, the situation that might be at their work that you don't know about? I mean, that's crucial to be able to get that data. But that's what I like about having those types of tools, is that you can actually, when you have that little bit of data, it's a little bit easier to probe a little bit, like, so you're not making the assumptions.
Right.
On that type of
I mean, don't assume anything. If you're going to assume, if you want to assume anything, assume positive intent.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then,
yes.
And then have the conversation, right? Have the conversation and put it in the context of what you observe. So you're not putting judgment into the conversation. Because I had a mentor one time tell me, people don't do stupid because they're stupid. People do dumb things because they're under stress.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's funny, I like that when you say have an assumption of positive intent, because how many times, just think about it, that it's just human nature. We automatically assume negative intent.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, that guy cut me off in traffic because he's a jerk. No, he just found out that his kid just got hit by a car and is in the hospital. No, he's, what I mean? It's not
you just don't know, right?
You just don't know. Now, granted, I'm not disputing the fact that there aren't jerks out there, right? You statistically, you've got a chance to be correct, but that's not the same as broad brushing everybody in every situation because of an assumption.
And I think
I like
that
mindset.
It's kind of like a human nature thing. I think we just it's easy for our brains to process, oh, this happened, therefore there must be this kind of person. You have no idea. You have no idea.
Yeah. No, or like I said, and then motives and intent. Why?
Right.
What's the why behind a lot of that stuff? You're absolutely right. But I think it's a coping mechanism. It's easy to process. And when you have to, brain has to process, just hundreds and thousands of pieces of data coming at it all the time. Unfortunately, it's easy to, I think, to fall into that trap of, let's just categorize, stereotype, get it out of the way, and keep hard charging forward. And we have to be very intentional and deliberate about what you were saying.
Well, many times what happens too is we assume something ill intent or whatever, and it festers. We don't deal with it. We don't dig it. We don't address it, right? And it festers. Well, it never gets better. And unless you have the conversation, you're not going to know if you're on point or not. You may find out you totally had it totally wrong.
Yep. And then all the time and effort and energy and that you've wasted, and I said all the stress that comes along with that, that's not a good thing. And I'm laughing about your cortisol-filled email that you just left and then come back the next day and read, and you're like, yeah, maybe I won't send that. Yeah, let's.
Exactly.
That's not me. That was the cortisol talking. That was the adrenaline talking. So, all right. Well, I also want to ask you too, what do you think is the best way for leaders to improve their leadership skills? We got about 7 minutes left in the show, and I really wanted to touch on, what do you think is the best way for leaders to be able to improve their leadership skills?
Well, I think you have to really enhance your awareness. So you have to be plugged into your people. You have to just kind of know what's going on. So you gotta be visible. You gotta talk to your people. You gotta talk to your direct reports. Create an environment, a culture where it's okay, I think, to make mistakes in the organization, especially now. The speed of change is so much faster, right? So having good conversations with direct reports, modeling the behavior you want to see. As I like to tell my clients, everything starts with you. Everything flows from you as the leader, and you set the tone, right? You set the bar. And so you want to have I think you want to have a culture of, mistakes are okay. Hopefully you fail fast and fail cheaply, right? I think I think Hewlett Packard used to have that motto, I believe. You want to fail fast and fail cheaply, but try new things, right? Don't be afraid to try new things. And to encourage that mistakes are okay, because that's how we learn. That's how we grow, right? Create a system of continuous feedback loops from your customers, from your employees. It's good ideas can come from anywhere in the company, right?
Yes.
You don't want to assume anything. You don't want to assume anything.
What's funny you say that. I was working with the CEO one time, and it was hilarious. It's funny, not funny type of thing. Unfortunately, you were talking about the communication, because you think you know what's going on, and you make the assumptions. But, and I'm not, don't take it the wrong way, I'm not downplaying or criticizing middle management, but they're in the middle. They're squeezed, right? So they're catching flack from the bottom up, and obviously they have performance indicators, things they have to do for the top down, and so. Is it in their natural benefit, the way we design organizations, the way we design systems and career ladders, for a middle manager to come to you as a CEO and say, hey, boss, my division stinks, right? We're having all kinds of issues and problems, and I'm not quite sure what to do about it. No, that's a natural disincentive. Why would they do that? Because they're probably going to get smacked down. Oh, this person doesn't know what they're doing. So all the information that goes up, I used to say that that middle management was the best filtration system on earth. It was better than reverse osmosis, charcoal, anything. It was the best filtration system on earth. Was better than a HEPA filter. It was middle management, because there's so much stuff on the bottom, and as a CEO, you had to be. It was one that you had to be very deliberate in figuring ways of communication to get accurate and timely information on what's going on the ground. Not as a disrespectful thing for the management in between you, not at all. But if you don't get that communication line coming directly to you, you're going to be at a distinct disadvantage, and going on, like you said, assumptions based on what you're told, maybe not what actual conditions are on the ground.
Well, I think too, the dovetail on that is, you have the right key performance indicators, right? Whatever you measure is what you're going to get back from your teams, right? So you want to measure the things that really make a difference in your business. So know what your key KPIs are. So, the division head, what department head, whatever, they're giving you information that's focused on the KPI, so you can make decisions more quickly. I think the other thing too is that along the lines of assumptions is you got to listen. You got to listen to people. Don't talk all the time, right? Let silence do the heavy lifting.
I like
silence
that.
Do the heavy lifting, and really just listen like your life depends on it, right? Listen intently, and listen between the words. Listen between the words, so that there's maybe there's something that's not being spoken or evoked yet, right? And you want to be harsh on people. You want to get to the bottom of things, and sometimes it takes 3, 4, 5, 7 questions to get to the real issue. That may be affecting someone's performance, or what's going on in their division, or a customer, or whatever it might be. So you want to listen intently and ask good questions, thought-provoking questions, to really understand. Come from a place of gaining more knowledge for yourself. And I think some of the other things that I think leaders can do is, the biggest issue right now, I hear it all across industries, is retention. So what can you do? You need to be able to engage with your high potential leaders. Nothing's worse than a kick in the gut when a high potential leader, someone that you really like, and they're doing well, and you see great potential for them in the organization, when they come to you and they say, I'm leaving. Because it happens all the time. You get totally blindsided. So how do you deal with that? You got to be in touch with them. You got to really find out what's going on. And they're personal, I don't want to probe into everything, but what's going on personally for them? How are they feeling? What's happening? What kind of, what support do they need?
I'm pretty sure that they didn't come to that decision at the spur of the moment, just as something willy-nilly. It's been building up to that point.
Building up. And some people will leave because of a paycheck, $5,000 difference, whatever. Those are not your high-performing leaders. The high-performing leaders are people have been with you for some time. You know what they can do. They bring great value to the organization. They contribute to the organization. And you want to just have your ear to the ground. You want to know what's going on for them. You want to clear away the obstacles for them to help them really excel and to really thrive in their area of unique ability. It's not all about money or benefits, right?
Yeah,
I think everybody wants to feel like they are contributing to the organization and making a difference and see a future for the organization. So sharing your vision is sharing a clear vision for everybody to help them kind of a path to understand where do they fit in and where are you headed.
Nice. Well, that gives a few ways that leaders can improve their leadership skills, I think. And I mean, that's important. You listing a few roadmaps, a few little items that they can do that. So we got about a minute left. So my question is, how can people get in touch, stay in touch with all things John Fenton, the CEO Sensei, you talk about your book, anything you happen to have. But like I said, how do they get in touch, stay in touch, and be able to reach out and connect with you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, David. First of all, you can get my book, 5-Minute Mastery. It's on Amazon.
Okay.
It's the #1 new release and bestseller. And I would just say that I have several reviews and there. People have come to me even recently, and the book's been out a couple of years now, and said to me, this book has made a difference for me in my life. Nice. So I encourage you to get the book. Also, you can I have a companion guide for CEOs and managing partners that gives you a step-by-step process. It's a 1-page document, a PDF that will guide you through a way that you can really focus in on your clarity every day to help you be the best leader you can be. And that guide, just go to my website, johnjfenton.com/CEO guide.
Okay.
johnjfenton.com/CEO guide. And it's a simple tool you can use right away, and will really get you started each day with much greater clarity and focus, personal growth. It will all lead to more profitability in the business and for yourself personally. And if you certainly you can go to my website and you can sign up for a free consultation if you'd like to as well.
Cool. Well, I would definitely recommend everybody reach out, connect with John. Like I said, he's a great leader. Like I said, has definitely some unique insight that he brings to the table, and I couldn't recommend people to connect with you highly enough. So like I said, I'm sure you can always, LinkedIn as well. I know you're very active on there. So definitely reach out, connect with John. And thank you so much for being on the show today. And that wraps up Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. And we will see you next time